All right, folks, just so you know, we are now recording. We'll just be using this to take notes. The city may upload these to the city website just for folks to be able to see if they missed any of the meetings, but just so that you are all aware.
Perfect. Give it a minute or two for other folks to join. Aaron, do you know when we have everyone?
Yep, it looks right now we're missing just 2 people, so I'm going to look for them to log on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mike, you can see me in the mural there. I'm ready to take notes and start post-it noting as we go here.
Like Jonathan's with us too.
I'll be on with video in a moment. I'm driving back to the office, but I'm here.
Thanks, Jonathan. All right, well, let's in the interest of time, let's get going. How's that? Welcome. Looks like we've got some familiar faces and new faces here as well. Just a little bit of the background. In fact, we had an earlier discussion today. We're hosting these focus group discussions to really hone in on specific topics. And this one obviously is business owners and doing business along 15th Street. We've had focus group discussions over the past couple of days, including emergency services, fire and rescue, police. We also had neighborhoods earlier today. Folks that reside adjacent to or along the corridor, beautification and history, historic preservation folks joined us yesterday, as well as bike ped and advocacy folks. And then earlier this morning, we had the Chamber of Commerce Economic Development, of which a number of business owners were actually included on there. I think William Taylor was on there. Bob Rich, obviously, was another one. And Stuart O'Neill was on there too. So thanks for joining us. A little bit about the project, then we're going to turn it over and kind of open up our ears and listen to you guys more often here. But this is the 15th Street Complete Streets project. Where are we at in the process? Or let's actually introduce the cast of characters with us today and throughout the planning process. On the client side, we're led by Jonathan Russell and Aaron Royal. And you, I think Barikia is also helping out as we speak, and then Betsy Kane is as well. And so really those are the decision makers and the folks that are steering this and helping with logistics and outreach and PR. So on the consultant side, my name is Mike Rikowski. I'm a planner and engineer, and we've got a number of folks that are helping us on the project. Dan Hemme, a senior planner, as well as Amber Lewis, who's an urban designer and landscape architect, are helping to design the facility as well. So now we can get into schedule. And yeah, if it's a 3-part or 4-part series, we're in the 3rd phase, if you will. Hopefully you were part of the 1st phase or the 2nd phase, which meant a lot of the due diligence, data collection, street inventory, stuff like that. We collected volume data, traffic volume and crashes and demographics, and just to better understand who uses the facility, 15th Street. And then this area, the 2nd phase, was really more about data analysis, right? What does it tell us? As well as we hosted a project symposium, which is basically a open house or public workshop, which allowed people to interact a little bit differently. And we asked them some tough questions along the way. We also had a project website, which has a survey. We just closed that up, I think, on this past weekend, survey, and then some interactive mapping, online mapping exercise that gave people the ability to not only identify problems along the corridor and some of the needs, but it also challenged them to identify potential solutions. So a lot of this stuff you're going to be seeing on paper virtually is some of the things that they've come up with. And this week we are hosting what we call that Project Charrette, which is another word for a multi-day design workshop where we have planners, engineers, landscape architects, and urban designers all under one roof. And we're trying to work out some of the design details, ultimately creating what we call design concepts. So you can see the physical footprint of some of the physical changes along the corridor. And then we'll come back after we revise some of these maps and these images and some of the design plans. We'll come back in probably a month and a half and do kind of a grand finale, yet another open house to talk about the recommendations and even talk about cost. How do we move forward towards implementation? So that is good. So let's turn over to you. Aaron, you want to introduce yourself, and we'll go that way, and then we'll talk to the kind folks that joined us.
Sure. Well, welcome everybody. I think I've been in coordination with most of y'all via email, so thank you for your time. My name is Erin Rule, and I am the Director of Tourism, but also Assistant City Communications. And so we're happy to have you here today to nail down some specific issues regarding 15th Street and the business community in particular. So thank you.
Jonathan, you want to go next? Thanks, Aaron. And I think he's traveling, so
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, again, just kind of an introduction as far as where we are with the project, or for me. Sorry, I pulled up here at the office and someone else was talking with me for a moment.
That's okay. Just introduce you. Everybody wants to know who their favorite town manager is.
Yes. Yeah. Again, Jonathan Russell. They're trying to help facilitate moving the project forward. I think there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of variables there, but up to this point, we've done a great job of soliciting public comment. But again, thank you for everyone for participating.
Awesome, thank you. And Betsy, you bat last on an elected official standpoint, right? Why don't you introduce yourself and unmute? There you go.
I will do that. Thank you, Mike. I'm Betsy Kane. I'm on the City Council. I think most of you already know me. I'm really glad we're doing this. Been wanting to get to this point since I came on City Council and we started talking about 15th Street again. And what I'm really interested in here is what you think. I really wanted the community to be at the heart of the formulation of any solutions that we try to move forward with. And so it's really important that you're here and please contribute your input and your preferences. Thanks.
Thank you, Betsy. So let's just dive into it. We know enough about us. We want to hear from you. So let's go around the horn a little. Just introduce yourself and what is your interest? First of all, this is obviously the focus on business, community, and commerce. So what's your interest, and what maybe even share some of your insight about the good and the bad and the ugly when it comes to 15th Street. So let me see. Pat, I've seen you before, so we'll start with Pat and we'll move on to James. So Pat, go ahead. The floor is yours. And we're going to document this too to make sure that we hear you properly. And so go ahead, Pat.
I'm Pat Griffin. I have a couple of businesses on 15th Street. One belongs to Washington Investors and the other belongs to Properties Down East. The Washington Investors is the Arby's, and then there's an office building on the corner of 15th and Jackson Street. And I've been involved in this part of the street for a long time. And I'm looking forward to seeing something coming along better than what we had the first time. It just was going to cause a lot of problems. And I think all of us are interested in the ability to get in and out of our businesses.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Pat. So yeah, access, ingress, egress is very important. That is business. So Pat, thank you so much. And James, you're up next.
My name is James Gaynor. I'm a property owner on 15th Street, a business called Avamar Orthotics. I don't own the business, but I lease the space. Didn't get an opportunity to be here the first couple of days. So I'm hoping to get a little bit of information about what's going on with the project, where we stand, the cost, etc.
Terrific. Thanks for being with. And James, what was the name of that business again?
Avamar Orthotics. It's at the corner of 15th and Bridge.
Is that Aquatics? Okay.
Orthotics.
Orthotics.
Orthotics, yes.
Dan,
I gotcha. Yeah.
thank you. All right, we're moving on here. Let's do that. Oops, let me get that. Walker, you are up next. And just unmute yourself. Walker Lynch. All right, let's move on. Ryan Whitford.
Sir, so I am a local Allstate agent. My office is on 15th Street next to the GCF building. We've been here since who built this place? Rick Stevens built it for me in 2004. It seems that it's interesting through the years how there have been quite a few conversations about an improvement of 15th Street, but I think nobody had really a really good way to implement that. The last opportunity that came up was the massive thing that they were going to run through here that was going to take all kinds of property and just be like it seemed like it was going to be a huge road project running through Washington. And I think that as a whole, I think everybody kind of walked away from that deal. But one of the reasons that I wanted to be involved is because the last time when there was conversation about this, the large street that was going to come through here, it was going to cause a significant problem with my parking lot. We have a very small parking lot in the front of the building for customers, and then parking along the side for myself and my staff. But doing away with any of that was really going to be problematic. I understand this new approach is much less intrusive when it comes to right of ways and that type of thing. So obviously I would think that would be much more welcome to everyone involved, especially when it comes to having to give up property. That said, safety is a major concern, and I've like James, I have not been involved up until today, aside from a few emails that I've seen along the way. But I'm very interested in being and having input, I guess, in what's happening, and certainly willing to help any way that I can.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, safety. We'll get into the some of the things that we've heard as we move along. Walker, it looks like you are unmuted, so you want to share your thoughts and introduce yourself? Probably still having some technology challenges here, unfortunately. That's okay. And maybe, not quite sure, Dan, if you can help that process out, but that would be great.
Yeah.
Let's just jump right into it as well. We are documenting what we're here, so we appreciate you guys taking the time and opportunity, and rightfully so. This is your livelihood, right? Some of you live here, all of you work here and own property, or at least lease a business property as well. And so hopefully you've been part of it. A couple of you have not been part of it originally, but I think you're right. Some of you have mentioned the safety issues along the corridor. We are taking a couple steps back. The project that was introduced to you by DOT, 4 or 3 years ago, wasn't very well received because it took a lot of property. Who's kidding who? So the reality is we want to stay within the area that's owned and operated by DOT. In other words, curb to curb, and then the land that DOT owns already which incorporates what we call right-of-way. And so it's going to be important for us to stay within our space, within the right-of-way that the property that DOT owns and operates. So that's going to be important. Ryan, it's not to say that like at an intersection, we might go beyond that a little bit just to put in a right lane or to put in a sidewalk or a side path or something like that. But for the most part, we are staying within the curb or within the right of way, which is a little bit beyond the curb to curb. The way we're doing that, and I'll go right into it. The way we're doing that is we're simply repurposing what's out there today. And so, and hopefully most of you know what right of way is. This is the area, and I'll define that. This is the area that NCDOT owns and operates. This is not private land whatsoever. And so, originally when this was a dirt road, it was a 2-lane dirt road, and they simply paved over it to make 2 lanes. And then 40 years after that, they widened it out to 4 lanes, but they never bought additional right of way to do anything more than that. And that's why when they came back and showed you the super street, which has a different connotation altogether, and it really dictated a much broader footprint, I think about 150 feet. So, or if not more, so more than twice the amount of land that is owned by the state already. So that really impacted, Ron, your parking, like you mentioned,
Yes.
and access and property, even buildings. So we are trying to stay away from that. Ryan, did you have something to share?
What's that?
I didn't know if you had something to share.
Oh, no. That was, you're right. That was, I remember a conversation from that time frame. It's hard to believe it's been, I guess, that long ago. I was thinking just a couple of years, but I can remember, there was a considerable concern over the amount of property that was going to have to be taken in terms of houses and then properties along that 15th Street. And I think originally it was going to go from just past my office to just to the other side of my office. And then it went a little bit further than that. And then it was going to be 17 down to Market Street, I think. And then it went from 17 all the way to 264 on the other side. And it's just like it got bigger and bigger and more expensive and taking more and more property. And obviously, it grew into a large concern. But and that said, if there's a way to accomplish more safety, if there's a way to accomplish, the sidewalks and various things that are there, and to do that inside of the confines of what's there to the most part now, obviously I'm all for that. I'm sure everyone would be. It's just that, like I say, the trouble is if you look at properties up and down 15th Street, in many cases, there's not a whole lot of room to give. There's not a whole lot of space taken away without causing a problem. Not just for my office. I know that's the case at quite a few places up and down. But like I say, if there's a way to accomplish this that can open that up, there's obviously a good thing. One thing that I have wanted to ask was, has there been consideration for what was done on 5th Street several years back? I guess we had this very same scenario of 4 lanes with no turn lane, and they did away with that and put 2 lanes with a turn lane down the middle. And I know that it seems like initially there was some complaining about backing up and various things at certain times during the day because of the lack of a passing lane, if you will. But I don't know that it's like everybody kind of got used to that.
Sitting in.
Gotcha. So we'll look into that, and I'm just marking this down. What can we do? What they did, and you're not the first one that came up with that. That's good. It's consistency. We're hearing things they like, things they don't like, and this is awesome.
The advantage of that, obviously, is that there's no, I guess, aside from maybe adding sidewalks, which is certainly a feasible thing to do, there would be no need to expand the curb area, so to speak, because you could accomplish opposite going lanes with a turn lane all the way down the middle. It's always popped in my head as what seems like a viable solution to 15th Street and maybe even
a trial. I don't know if it's possible to restripe the roads and try it for 6
Oh,
months.
yeah. Yep.
Anyway, this is my 2 cents.
Well, I'm glad you fed it right into there because like he's not a plant on our call here, but Ryan speaks the direction. So what we have done is try to repurpose that area that's owned and operated, that 60 feet that's already owned and operated that has no private land. So you're right. We are actually trying to we're looking at doing repurposing some of that asphalt out there.
Okay.
And accommodating. Look, as I back up, the number one issue we're trying to deal with is safety. And I think even NCDOT said that's the absolute number one priority along the corridor. And I think that just looking at the corridor itself, it does carry a lot of traffic. So I'd be remiss if I didn't address that. It carries between 13,000 and 20,000 vehicles a day. But what's happening in this 4-lane road, and Walker, I see that you joined us as well. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself too in a second here. But, and all of you tell me if you've experienced this, but especially during peak hour, when there's a car and you're driving down and say this direction going one way and you're behind a car and it turns on its left hand blinker, what do? You slam on your brakes and you immediately shift to the right to weave over to the right side. So in essence, what's happening here is that this 4-lane is really acting like a 3-lane, isn't it? Because the inside lanes, God forbid, someone turns on their blinker because now it's reduced to 2 through lanes. And so why don't we just memorialize that and put a 3-lane road in there? The number one thing in terms of the traffic laneage was the lack, and what we heard from folks was the lack of a left turn bay. And so what we would advocate is a 2-lane divided with median pockets to slow down cars, and a 3-lane, predominantly 3-lane cross section to allow safe left turns and right turns out of businesses. This would no longer take any driveways and it would no longer take any property. With that, we would put a sidewalk on one side, and then we bring that curb and gutter in by 1 lane and put in a multi-use side path right now. The number one issue for bicycle pedestrian was that, well, there is no treatments for bicycle pedestrian and people feel extremely unsafe. So the past 10 years, there's actually been 3 fatalities involving pedestrians and bicyclists along this corridor. People have been killed. And so it's extremely unsafe, not just for drivers, but for people on 2 feet or 2 wheels. So I'm going to stop.
Oh,
Mike, you may have muted yourself.
There you go, Walker. Walker Lynch, please introduce yourself and tell us what you see along this corridor and what's your interest.
All right, can y'all hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Correct.
All right, I'm on now. I'm Walker Lynch with Bergall & Company. We're here at 1100 West 15th Street. We're an independent insurance agency. And as we're relatively new to 15th Street, having come from downtown, the biggest impact that I'm seeing as far as the different designs is going to be the impact a lot of us small business owners with our parking out front, because we're a little bit unlike some of the big box stores or the shopping center across the street. We don't really have any room to give. If it was anything outside the footprint that's there now, it would impact us greatly as far as the ingress and egress to our property. So that's one of my biggest concerns, is how will it affect the clients that we got coming and going. And unfortunately, like Ryan and myself, we don't have any room to give behind us either. We don't have any, anywhere to use behind us to transfer that parking. So, we're looking at it real close from that standpoint. I'm not an expert on this, on the options that are out there, but that's the biggest impact I think to our business would be the possibility that they might want to take some land out front.
Gotcha. And it's a keen interest, and the one that we've heard as well. Our philosophy moving forward, Walker, and to the rest of the group, is that we are going to try to stay within the existing area we call right of way that's owned and operated by Department of Transportation in the state. We do not want to close driveways, and we do not want to take parking. We do not want to take property. So that's not, and again, that's not to say that at an intersection, it may bump out one way or one another way to make sure that we get in the proper left turn there. Ryan, you brought that up, to just to make sure that at the intersection, there's a adequate left turn bay, so you're not stuck in front of the other car and you can't see around it, which is happening today. So yeah, that's our commitment to you guys. And I think we can do this. And I think that, by sticking with our guiding principles and sticking with the design considerations, we can make a much safer road, number one. We can keep cars flowing. I will say this, no, you're not going to have the same carrying capacity as a 4-lane road, but it's not that much less with a 3-lane road. And I say that only because that 4-lane is really, and a lot of times, most often, acting like a 3-lane road, because those two inner lanes are basically for left turns for the most part. No one wants to be stuck behind another one. So some of the things that we'll be looking at is really increasing and then protecting, bicycle pedestrian. Let's face it, it'd be great if there are some folks that could walk to the grocery store or walk to the Mexican food restaurant or the fast food, whatever. And right now there's a lot of folks that actually have to walk or have to ride a bike to do that. But there's no amenities or treatments for them to do such a thing. So that's where we are at. So what does that look like? Again, Walker, I think you came in a little bit during the beginning of the conversation, but we're actually going from Brown Street, which is right here. And I'll zoom in a little bit. Brown Street all the way over a mile, 1.6 miles, I believe it is, all the way to Carolina over here. What we do in there is really a function of these design features here. So multi-use path on one side. We're trying to put in street trees and pedestrian level lighting. That's one of the things that people were advocating for. Because it gets dark, at 6 or 7 o'clock, and now it's a little bit better, but during the winter, it gets dark at 5. And so we want to make this, instead of an 8-hour corridor, an 18-hour corridor. And then, so you can cater to a lot more needs when we have these types of facilities. And also how we're treating those major intersections is really, really important. I won't go through what you're looking at here, but every time you see a symbol, a square or a circle, we're putting in high quality crossings, high visibility crosswalks, pedestrian countdowns, pedestrian level lighting, shade trees, ADA compliance, which is basically ramps for disabled folks. And I think that's important. Just to give you an idea, this is, sometimes we get a little excited with our design palette here, but that's okay. And this is just kind of I think one of you talked about, the Washington Plaza and that area, and that's the Mexican restaurant here, which is great. But how better of an environment and how more attractive would it look like if you had some outside seating in here too? And so how would we build this, right? If we were to repurpose some of that asphalt, this is what it would look like. We'd actually take this outside curb and gutter and not go out like is suggested by DOT's design, but actually come in to a certain degree. And instead of having 4 lanes, we have 3 full lanes in there to accommodate traffic east and west. But then that extra room that we now gain can be used for a side path in there. So kind of, I know our folks took a little bit of liberty on this one, but now you have a through lane here. This section doesn't have any driveways here, so we can put in a pocket median at this location. And then you see the side path that can cater to everything from 8 to 80, someone on a tricycle or someone on a mountain bike or someone jogging or someone, some elderly couple that just wants to get out and do a little exercise. You'll also see things like pedestrian level lighting, much like you see in 5th Street downtown. Some banners to kind of introduce people, make it more of a live and convenient, and really beautify the corridor in itself. It's kind of an eyesore when you drive through it. And so, and then we're not telling people what to do with their property, but how nice would that be for the restaurant, the Mexican restaurant, to have outside seating, which everybody is in demand, especially in this corridor. I don't even know if there is any outside seating. how nice would it be for some of the offices and clinics and the other complexes, and then the rest, the neighborhood, to have a place to congregate. So this is just, kind of outside perspective of what could happen if we put in this public investment along the corridor. We would certainly want to expect and hope that private reinvestment, whether it's facade upgrade or whether it's some infill or redevelopment, it would spur that interest on a development standpoint. Likewise down here, I think this is an old picture. I was hoping they'd get a new one in there. Dan, if you can ask them to just plop that in here, that would be great. I think they have a new perspective in here, but you can see our designers are kind of working. This is Van Norden, and there's no signal here. So if you really look closely, think about coming in here in the neighborhood and saying, how do I cross this street? Well, they can't cross it for another 1,500 feet down there. But the reality, we talked to Miss Vanessa today, who lives back here. She goes, people are just running across there. And so we wanted to put in a nice safe haven there for someone to rock in with maybe a hybrid or a hawk signal there, which is actual signal and actually stops cars. And, if someone pushes a button, it activates. So this is kind of a draft version of what that looks like. So as we go back, let's turn it back to you guys. And a couple things that you guys have talked about is ingress, egress, making sure your folks can get to, and then the protection of parking spaces. I can say here with probably a 99% level of accuracy that we are not impacting anybody's number of parking spaces on this. So that's good. So check that off the list. Ingress, egress, or having full access there. We're still keeping those driveways. Some of them will revert to right in, right out. But if you're landlocked, in other words, you only have one way in and one way out as a business or a residential, what we're trying to do is not put a median in front of there. So predominantly, this corridor is going to be looking like more of a 3-lane road on there with pockets of median. The reason for the pockets of median is important. We want to be able to slow down cars. Even your chief of police, Chief Drakeford, I believe that's his name, it said, speeding is most prevalent along here. People are speeding, and probably the folks on this phone call are speeding as well. Who's kidding who? So, and then going through red lights, he said he's given a lot of tickets for people trying to blast through and trying to make that light, and they go through a red light. So that's important. So what we have to do, those pockets of median, is providing it's beautification, yes. It's stormwater BMPs, which are filtration. When it floods, it does flood around this corridor, this area. And so it filters as well, but it really acts to slow down cars and to get in and out of the corridor. Let me see, what else? Oh, I've got another one here. The idea at Brown Street, as you know, Brown Street is the confluence. Let me see here if I can get this going. Here we go. Let me move this. There you go. Thank you. Let me see where we're at. Oh, here we go. If you look at Brown Street, which is on the total end of our corridor, you can think of it as the beginning. It's really a really dysfunctional area here. And I say that only because it's where a really bad turn is. This is one of the most intersections where the chief of police said that people are driving through the red light, trying to get past there. It's also the connection or confluence of all these streets. So it's a 5-legged intersection. It's got a dead man's curve here, and it's a horrible skew. So this is just really terrible. One of the thoughts that we're having, I'll share this with you. We haven't shared it with anybody else, is to, what do you think about, creating kind of a gateway effect, cleaning this up, since it's all going to be like 2 lanes, and putting in a roundabout at this location, just to see what that would look like. Obviously, we want to slow down cars as they go through this area. And this is kind of that gateway. The way it's oriented, the way it looks, it'll change obviously from here, but you can get a sense we can actually fit it in there without taking anybody's building or anybody's parking necessarily on this thing. So we're monkeying around with that a little bit, but it would be really nice because what we hear, and people coming through the intersection, they're driving into this area here, and people unexpectedly are, coming around the corner here and not expecting someone to slam on their brakes and take a right turn. So I'm going to stop there. We're showing you a little bit of taste of what you're going to be able to see the next couple of days. But let's go to the chat box too. If you want to chime in, there's a small group, so feel free to share your thoughts and even your frustrations.
Mike, I got a question if I can.
Yeah, so go ahead, Walker.
What's the criteria or the priority you would do, like on the away from the Brown Street end to the other end, as far as the left turns? How do you decide? Because so much of us, our driveways don't enter to other streets, and across the street from me, Wells Fargo is just off a little bit. How are you going to prioritize how you divide that and how you left turn it versus all the different businesses out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is my rule of thumb. If you have more than one access point, right? If you have more than one access point, you're fair game for a planted median. I mean, of course, what you just brought up, you have a side street that connects to a signal, that's fair game. If you're a fast food restaurant or a pass-by type business where, oh, it's the last minute gas station, I'm going to fill up with gas, I'm less likely to put a median in there unless you have multiple driveway entrances. And let's face it, some of these corner lots have up to 5 driveways, ingress, egress. Do they need all that? No. And the problem with that is that adds to the accidents along here. And that's why 15th Street is 1.4 times the state average crash rate of any other 4-lane road in the state of North Carolina. So I hope that answers your question. If you only have one way in and one way out, we're less likely to put any kind of median pocket in front of you, to answer your question, because that's your only way in.
And I know you mentioned that the having that divided median in there was to help with the speed out there.
Yeah.
If you did have that and didn't do the median thing, but just we leaned on Chief Drakeford and all that, have more of a presence out there for the speeding part of it, would that allow all the businesses to still maintain their current access points right now?
Yeah, I do think you're going to control speed. There's one thing there. In order to control speed, you have to redesign the road. You have to. And here's a good analogy. Some folks say, well, why don't we just lower the speed limit to 35 or to 30 or 25 miles an hour along 15th Street? Our response is, it isn't going to do anything. People are breaking the speed limit as it is today. No one's paying attention to that. And the reason for that is it's flat, it's wide, it's all asphalt, and there's no friction to slow them down. So you have to redesign the corridor if you want to slow folks down. The main premise behind the roundabout, this is a great example of traffic calming 101. This roundabout is the absolute best way to slow down vehicles. Why? Because no one's blasting through this roundabout more than 15 or 20 miles an hour. You physically can't do that unless you run up and go through the middle of there. So that's really important. This is a best traffic calming device. That's why we like, unless Ryan has a pickup truck and he's going to take it right through there. But all kidding aside, this is the best treatment. I like putting this on the peripheral of the corridor because it tells people, hey, you better slow down and expect more pedestrians than bicyclists along the corridor. So the median pockets do the same with some sort of verticality, more than just grass. Hopefully we can put in some nice plantings. I mean, Little Washington is a historic community. You've got some wonderful plantings downtown and 5th Street, streetscape. So why don't we celebrate that and make it a beautiful corridor? And part of that will be to slow down cars along the corridor. But to answer your question, if you have our premises, if you have one way in, one way out as a business, we're hopefully not going to put a median in front of there. Because we know you have also service trucks, not just for clients, but service trucks that go in there as well. So, and we can always change that. The concept designs that we're going to put in front of you in the next couple of days, they will absolutely change when it goes into final design. So we have a lot of time. We're just trying to get the overall premise and the overall philosophy of how to redesign this and make it more safe and more multimodal and more connected. So that's a longer version of your answer, but I think we touched on a number of things, Walker. So that's a great question. Do you guys have any other insight that you guys have? One thing I want to ask you, and it's kind of interesting, you live in this community, you guys have businesses here. What's missing along 15th Street in terms of businesses or services or goods that you could see if we put in this public investment along the corridor, that it could attract new business or new services? What do you guys think as business owners? Anything pop into mind? I'll throw one out there. We have had a lot of interest for restaurants, not just Mexican restaurants, but restaurants, cafes, sandwich shops, Starbucks, stuff like that. People are, balancing the competing interest of a franchise business versus a locally owned business. I'm not quite sure if you guys have thoughts on that, but yeah, what are some of the gaps? Any thoughts? If any. All right. All right. And so last but not least, let me see. What other issues do you guys see that we need to make sure we adhere to in terms of when we redesign this? Are we missing anything?
Is there any such thing as in the design process that certain ways create the least amount of disruption for the businesses along 15th Street? Is there such thing as designing it in such a way that it creates the least amount of impact to us during that construction phase?
Oh, good question. That's the first one asked. So that's construction phase, like traffic control during construction. Well, the good news is this: since we're not taking right away, right? We're limiting that. The duration, I will say, the duration is going to be limited, right? Because right-of-way acquisition normally accounts for about 70% of the cost of a project. That's just a given fact. DOT will tell you that. Now that we're not taking so much right-of-way, that time frame really drops down, plummets, so we can move this along much easier. As far as construction, the good news is we're not moving both sides of the corridor. And that's important to understand. And that was very intentional. In other words, when we put in this side path over here, we're only moving one curb. The good news is we're moving that curb inward. And as an engineer, that is great news, because if we moved it outward, we'd have to change what? We would have to change the water and sewer underneath, the drainage, right? And so we're actually moving it in. And so all we need to do is pipe the drainage inlet back to the sewer. So that's good. The other news is, hear this, there will be some construction pain through this. Normally, it wouldn't be so bad based on what we're showing here. But Jonathan, I want you to chime in here. Part of this, I guess, DOT and the city have negotiated with early on was that there's an old sewer line in here, right down the middle of your road, that needs to be replaced. Not only does it need to be replaced, it needs to be relocated. We're hopefully going to relocate it to the outside near the side path here. Those are two things that are that is going to work against you, Walker, because that's going to take some really unique traffic control. I say we do the side first, and we bring in the curb and gutter, and then you're going to see the replacement of the sewer line, and it's going to go outside where we pulled in the curb and gutter. So it's all can be done at once. So yeah, there's going to be some pain through the construction phase of this. But it's only because of the current sewer problem, not because of the transportation improvements. That sewer's old. So Jonathan, what's the status on that and any insight on that?
You've covered most of it. There is a sewer main existing that runs partially, pretty close to the middle of the existing roadway that would need to be moved. And it's not the full length of the corridor. I believe the majority of it is present, kind of, I guess, when you're heading east, as you're leaving the commercial area closer to Carolina Avenue, as you're getting into the residential area. I think that's where you see more of the sewer main be existing in the middle of the street. But again, it would cause some major traffic disruption, as well as some delays in the construction process.
Yeah, we'll have to.
Question.
Does that answer your question, Walker? It's probably not what you want to hear.
One thing though, that some silver lining there, we may have some upgrades on some of the existing stormwater facilities also that may lessen flood impacts. So, that some silver lining.
Can I ask Jonathan on this real quick too?
Yes, sir.
We're having trouble getting fiber to us in an affordable way. Is this going to open up the door for some of those kinds of services better than what we got now?
Possibly. Most of that is held up through just current state legislation. I know the county recently contracted with River Street to provide fiber service within the city limits. We are looking at awarding a contract to them as well, and that would provide somewhat of a workaround to allow them to come into the city, and then they can provide to customers. There's some non-compete issues that some larger telecommunication companies have lobbied and established laws to prevent the competition. But I think we're trying to work around some of that. So we may have some different alternatives here. Not extremely soon, but within the next 12 to 18 months.
Right. Thank you.
All very good questions. We're trying to document this down here, Dan and I, so that's good. Any other questions you guys have? Any insight, things to be aware of? I think these are all very meaningful and logical questions that you have too, but your insight is valuable as well.
I was going to say, if the current plan is to stay basically inside of the boundaries of where you are or where the street is today and still accomplish the safety requirements and the beautification and everything that comes along with that, that I dare say I probably speak for all of us to say that is great. If you're able to avoid taking property, if the grassy area in the front of my lot becomes part grass and part sidewalk, that's not going to be a disruption in the scheme of things. Whereas if you push driving lanes, even 2 or 3 feet into my property, that creates a big problem. But I dare say that if you're able to accomplish this inside of the space that you've got now, then that certainly takes care of, I think, the biggest concern that the business owners have around here. When it comes to what trees are where, or if there's park benches or whatever it is, all that stuff's great and looks good and is helpful and everything else there. But at the end of the day, I guess, we have to be a little selfish in that respect toward, our property and what we have going on in visually along the roadway there as well. So, anyway.
Yeah, good point.
If I could piggyback, I'm sorry. If I could piggyback a little bit off of what Ryan said, from what I'm hearing is that the property owners don't really have to be overly concerned about losing property. The project is going to be constructed in such a way that that's not going to be an issue for us. And if we do lose any property, will we be compensated for that?
Shake your head. Yeah, that process, because it's still an owned and operated Department of Transportation. It's owned by the state. So yes, and it's to say, for the most part, we're not looking at acquiring a new right of way along the entire corridor. But again, I don't want to be presumptuous here, but at some key intersections, we might see some pushing back on some of the right of way, only to accommodate, the side path, which is the multi-use path, and maybe some language improvements there, but that's it. So yeah, other than that, the main line, we are trying to stay within what's there today. If at those intersections, if property is needed, then yeah, they will go through negotiation. They'll give you, it's a negotiation process, but yeah, it'll be compensated. They have to compensate you for that. Absolutely. Yeah. It should be easy though. I really think based on what I saw of the previous schematic or concept that was done, this is going to be a much easier implementation in terms of the process and moving this along. Certainly less destructive, I think, this approach. We really just need to get DOT, right now, I'm speaking amongst friends here, but I think that, the process, they probably regret how the process went prior. And I say it's the process and not the final product that necessarily was the problem. Yes, the final product took a lot of property, yes, but it's really a failure in how we communicate that made that whole first phase problematic or contentious. So, but beyond that, this process is much more transparent. It's open. We're changing things as we go along, and I think that's important. Betsy, did you want to share your thoughts? I didn't know if you're chiming in.
Yeah, I have one question that seems relevant to the business property owner's interest is what would be the potential timeline for construction? Because we're just in the planning and conceptual process now. Do we know anything about the potential timeline coming off of this plan?
That's a great question. The only thing we can compare back to is previous projects. So we did Main Street in Roseville, North Carolina, and they had no money towards this. And then the local MPO gave them some LAP funding. That's Campo, that's the Raleigh-Durham area region, gave them some money to move that forward. And now they're under full design after 2 years later, and gonna start construction in 3 or 4 months. Likewise, Cedar Street in Beaufort was another one. And the Department of Transportation moved that along because we came to consensus on what we wanted, basically, or at least informed consent, right? So in this case, the good news that's working for you is the right of way or the lack thereof, because that takes the most time and the most money to acquire. So if you eliminate that, or at least reduce it down to, where it was before, 70% of the project was probably right-of-way acquisition cost. And if you reduce that down to maybe 10%, now you're moving that process along much, much quicker. And now it's all about delivery. Here's the thing with working with DOT. I don't think they're going to be too happy. I don't think they were happy to see that one of their projects, after working on it for 4 years, went away. And neither was the city of Washington. This is the facts, right? I'm not putting any words in anybody's mouth, but that's the reality. And about them, their number one philosophy with DOT for the past 10 years is one word: delivery. They want to get shovel-ready projects delivered and built. And that mantra has not gone away. And I think having this and showing them that we can do this within this footprint, and it solves their number one issue of safety, and it brings in all the issues of the community about multimodal and bike and pedestrian, and it's safer, and it's beautiful, and we can do it for half the cost or whatever that magic number is, then that's a compelling reason for DOT to keep this in the books and move it forward to implementation. Just like so many other projects that we've worked on: Six Forks Road, Raleigh, Whiskey Road, Aiken, South Carolina, Hartford, Connecticut, Main Street. All of these were moving forward in full design and implementation construction because it's not that impactful. I know that's a long way of beating around there, but you guys are absolutely doing the right thing. This is going to be much more cost efficient for DOT. And well, let's give them a compelling reason to not discard this anymore, not to shelf this project, but reinvigorate it and get it moving along into implementation. I think that's the best compelling reason they have. They want to see it built. Jonathan, any side on the municipal administrative side to add to that?
No, I think, that you covered most of the high points on that, on moving it forward. I mean, there are a lot of different variables there that affect it. Political pressures and different feasibilities, from financial to technical to political. Again, I think just depending on what kind of consensus we could come to, that would be beneficial. And then even bringing DOT, they've got to have buy-in on all of this. It's got to be something they can support. So I think, there are a lot of variables, but I think, we've got some options to look at to move it forward if we do come to a consensus on a design.
They should pay us, the city, if we save them $10 million in right-of-way acquisition costs. Kind of feel like we should split the difference,
That's great. Did I hear split the difference and pay the consultant? Okay.
Okay.
I'm in.
Consultant gets a cut.
There you go. All kidding aside, no, it's good. But here it is. When we leave, we're going back to Raleigh, and that's the reality. Now it's up to you guys. This is why it's very important for the Jonathan, the Aarons, the Betsy, the Barikia, the Virginia, the Mayor Sadler to be involved and communicate what you want from the state. You've got to stay involved with this, and you've got to advocate, and you got to use your citizenry and your people and your business owners to advocate the same thing. You may not agree with everything, just like Dan alluded to earlier, but hopefully you can walk away with 5 things from this, 5 that you like and you want to have. So let's move this thing forward, but it's going to take a groundswell of folks to knock on that door at DOT, and then, your state, regional, legislative counterparts to move this thing forward. I think it's going to be meaningful. So I'll get off my pulpit now. All right, we're about the end of our 1 hour duration here, but you guys have been great. And if you need any other feedback, please reach out to Aaron and Barikia and even Jonathan or Betsy, because they're great information. They've been here every step of the way. I'm sure they're tired of hearing me say the same thing over and over and over again, but it's like a broken record. You say it enough time, people are going to start to believe it. That's Dan and my own fault on that one. But
That's okay, Mike. I'm quite the broken record myself.
perfect. All right. Well, good.
All right.
You can join us at 5. It's going to be, we're going to show more details in there, but at least come tomorrow at 5 o'clock, because I think you're going to see not only the design plans for the street, you're going to see a lot of photo sims. Those are what we mean by before and after photos, and really get some idea for development too. What happens beyond the right of way in some spot locations. Okay. Awesome. With that in mind, have a wonderful rest of your day and look forward to working with you.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.